Okay, so we want to discuss the fall 2015 project, basically the decoder and muxes project. First thing that I want you to do is to go to the Google page and watch the video of the project. That will basically show you what the output should look like on your DE0 board and what exactly you're trying to do. So after you've watched that, you can then go ahead and take a look at the manual for the project, which I have here. And if we take a look at it, we see that it's extremely similar to Lab 4. Basically, you can take your contents of Lab 4, your hierarchical design, and you can use that as sort of the building blocks for this project. We won't read about what we did in Lab 4. We'll sort of skip the first couple things. Notice that you want to use, for the name of your project, you want to use decoder and muxes, all lowercase, for the inputs. Okay, and these will be the inputs into your 7-segment converters. Notice you have to change from a single variable name to basically an element of an array. So you need to add the brackets for each of the switches 7 through 0 going into those two 7-segment converters that you used in Lab 4, which you're using now in the decoder and muxes. You also are going to add 2 switches, again, part of this bus, right? Switches 9 and 8. And then for the key, you're going to keep in the key 0, which was the control for hex 0. And notice that one is not set up as an element of an array. It's just a single name, so no brackets around that. For the outputs, you're going to use the brackets hex 5, 6 down to 0, and so forth for each of your outputs. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to set it up as a bus. If we take a look at our project, we see that basically here are our 2 7-segment converters, and we look at the inputs going into those. We see that we have basically a bus structure for all of those, right? So each of the switches now has brackets around them, so make sure you do that. Okay, so going back now to the next step in our project, we want to read what the next thing that we do. Basically, it says you've created the new project, so you're going to do that, and then you can use the parameters that you used in Lab 4. You can copy over, or you can open up within this project your hierarchical design.bdf, and then just save it as the decoder and muxes.bdf, adding it to the project. So add it to the project as well. You'll also need your 7-segment converter.v file, and you're going to create a project in that. Again, all of this is within the decoder and muxes folder that you've created this new project for. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to change the value of the constant in your decoder and muxes.bdf to the last digit of your student ID. Go back and look at Lab 3, figure out which LEDs need to be on for your digit of the last digit of your 9-digit student ID number. Okay, when I look at my student ID number, it is a 6. Okay, a 6 has all LEDs on except for LED 1. So notice LED 1 I want off, so I'm going to change this input to VCC. These were the wires that were originally called off 1. I just changed the name. This is an internal signal. You do not need to change the name. You can if you want to. Those are still being fed into the muxes, right? Here we have hex 5, which is basically receiving the constant value, or what used to be off 1, into the I sub 0 input. Okay, so set up your constants so that you have the correct LEDs on for the last digit of your student ID. You must show that your student ID number is being represented there when you show the TA your design. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so let me jump back here and go to the next step. Okay, so the next step is basically, once we've set up the constant, we want to add muxes. Okay, so we need to add muxes for each of the hex digits. We know that we have 5 hex digits total. We have one called hex 5, one called hex 4, one called hex 3, one called hex 2, and then we have the one left over from hex 0. And maybe you've used hex 3 and hex 5 from lab 4 as well. So you just have to add the 2 for hex 4 and hex 2. Okay, so add those. Each of the inputs should have the I sub 0 should be constant or off 1, and then you should use your SSC1 into your I sub 1 lines. Do notice that SSC1 is the output of the 7-segment converter that uses switches 7 through 4. Okay. All right, and so now when we take a look at our outputs, make sure and use a bus structure. Here I have a bus structure 0 through 5 for each of the hex digits. Okay, yeah, I used 0 through 5 there. I'm sorry, 0 through 6 there. Okay, I believe in the documents it said 6 down to 0. So go ahead and use 0 through 6 here. There, I noticed that is a discrepancy here versus in the document. So use 0 through 6. All right, and so we have each of those bus muxes. Now let's talk about the select lines going into those. We've added a decoder. We said that we want to be able to select which one of those 5, 4, 3, or 2 hex digits are going to display the value of SSC1. And so we're using this decoder that basically is going to enable one of the bus muxes. Okay, for the decoder, I chose this from the LPM devices, from the mega functions, and then I had to set the parameters. So you right click on it, set the parameters, set the input width equal to 2. Okay, I grounded, say I found the tool, I came up here to the symbol box and found the tool for primitives, and then went to other to find the ground symbol. So there's the little triangle that gives us the ground symbol that I've used here. And I can rotate these. Notice that if I right click and come down here to rotate, okay, rotate by degrees. If I rotate 270 to the left, then that will basically put it in this direction so that I can just connect directly through a wire to that input. You don't have to name these wires. I chose to name those wires just for my own clarification. Be careful with this bus. Here I have a bus coming in. I have named it switch 9.8, again in brackets. What some students have found is if they click on this portion and then check the properties, it has a name. Sometimes some students have found that when they click on some of the other parts of the bus, there is no name. So you may have to check all of each of the little connections in your bus to make sure that they all have the same name. I've seen some errors tonight where it was not fully connected. Okay, using the nodes, I now have connected 2 wires, one with a port called switch 9 and one with a port called switch 8. Again, I'm using the brackets to indicate an array, and they are being fed into the bus. Okay, I have taken the enable and set it to VCC. Okay, my output, I have a bus for my output. I've called it hex_select 3.0. Each of those wires that are in that bus are being connected to the select lines for the hex digits. Notice that hex 5 has a select line that is named hex select 0. Hex 4 has a select line hex select 1. Hex 3 uses hex select 2, and hex 2 uses hex select 3. Okay, and we talked about that in the YouTube video. Okay, this last bus mux is connected to hex 0. And so I have, for the select line for this, I have key 0, and then I have in my I sub 0 line SSC1 out, and for I sub 1, SSC2 out. Okay? So that's pretty much all you have to do. That is basically, the bus muxes are basically selecting which of these two outputs are going to be represented on the 7-segment display. And then we have the decoder that basically chooses which of these 4 muxes is going to show. It's going to have the I sub 1 line flow through. Okay, all the others have the I sub 0 line show through. Okay, so that's pretty much all that you have to do. Some things that I've seen for errors: make certain that the name of your project as well as your top level design is decoder and muxes spelled just like this. Make certain that you've changed the switches to use array elements. Those were the 2 biggest things. And then make certain that you have the correct select lines for each of the muxes. Okay, so that's what you have to do, and show it to your TA. All right, thank you for listening.